Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, good morning.
Great to be here. Yes, good morning. And I'm excited for our episode today. I'm excited for every episode, but we have a friend who's been with us most recently in our Reimagining Retirement Forums. So if you've been listening, which I hope everybody has, you know that we put on a series of forums this past November and December, and Farron joined us on those. So I won't jump too much into that right now, but we're excited to have him here today on a few different angles. But before we go into that, I'd like to just introduce Farron Blanc, CEO of Gerry. And Farron, why don't you kick off by telling us a little bit about yourself? How did you end up here and how did you start the company?
Yeah, no, thanks, Laura and Paul. Serial entrepreneur, started my first business when I was a teenager. And then most recently was working at a reinsurance company, which is where I met Paul, was helping start innovation there, working with our carrier partners, as well as trying to bring new businesses. So both backing entrepreneurs that are looking at insurance, life insurance, as well as our carrier partners. And kind of the genesis of why I decided to start Gerry is, so on the professional side, a lot of our carrier partners, and this was years ago, would just say, look, like long-term care and the aging economy is the biggest opportunity that's not really being met. Obviously pension funds are largely insolvent, or public pension funds are largely insolvent. People are living longer, so there's a need. And then the current offerings in the market, which we can probably talk about later, don't really fit the need. And then on the personal side, my father, he had Alzheimer's dementia. And so going through that process is just it's super stressful, super confusing, and it created a lot of chances for financial ruin for my family, for my mother, as we were trying to navigate finding home health aides, support workers, finding memory care communities, adult daycares, like all of these things that, you have to go through. It's super stressful, super confusing. So kind of seeing that and living that on the personal side, as well as kind of the market or professional background, really convinced me to really dig deep and think about how we can, if there is an opportunity and can we start something and fast forwarding. And now we have Gerry, where we're blessed to be backed by great investors and capital partners, and we created a small team. And what we're doing is we're helping seniors navigate all the complexities around health and wealth. We do that through a membership subscription program, where our goal is basically to save them time, money, or stress when they're thinking through essential services, their estate planning needs, as well as their health and plans of care, and so yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, it's great to have you on here. And, first of all, thanks for being on this forum, being a participant on our panel with us. It was great to have you on here. And just say, listen, I've enjoyed working with you in how many different capacities? Let's see. I've been in 2 different companies. You and I actually chased an incredibly interesting, fascinating deal, right? With a large fitness company. I think we were way out there. I think, there was that opportunity was a big one. You supported me on a sort of a brief startup I did, which was I appreciate that. And then we've had a chance to collaborate with you on the reinsurance side, as well as now your company. So let's we've just done a partnership. I'll kind of tease the listeners. We'll talk as we go about partnership. We have a pilot going right now with your company, but. So Farron, let's talk a little bit more about the problem. I think a lot of people can identify with what you're describing. I went through the same thing. My father passed away from ALS. Now I knew that was happening for about 18 months. And unfortunately, that's kind of one of these horrible things where clock starts ticking, and unfortunately, doctors, the averages tend to be right at this moment. My mother, so I knew it, but there was a short period of time. My mother suffered from dementia Oh, probably. It's interesting. I actually sort of figured this out when I got a call from the police.
Yeah.
You know, you can't make some of these things up in terms of when and how you find this out. But she suffered from dementia for probably 8 years, 9 years. It was a long, long process. And I'll tell you, that was an ordeal. And it was an ordeal from a distance because I was on the East Coast. She was out in the West. Stubborn, wouldn't move, had to deal with all the psychology of somebody resisting diagnoses, et cetera. How different am I from some of the people you're working with, or how different is my mother?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tragic, but a lot of our members, are going through the same thing, so I was just on a call yesterday, with one of our care concierges, and they were chatting through how, the mother went through a similar issue with his grandmother 20 years ago, and kind of made the promise to say, oh no, yeah, like that was very difficult, like super stressful. The burden of caring for, his grandmother fell on his mother. And then so he brought up, okay, look, like, you know what, like, let's come up with a plan. Whether it's living at home, an independent living community, what do you really want to do? And the mother just won't engage, just because these things are so difficult, right? And it really reinverts a lot of the, traditional structures, like family structures, like parent child, if there's siblings involved, it brings up all this like guilt, remorse, grief, on top of the financial aspects, because the stuff, as Paul, is not cheap at all. It's very, very expensive and cost prohibitive for many, many people if they don't have a plan in place. So unfortunately, it's not tragic. And I mean, even my own experience, my father, we thought he was kind of just like getting slowing down. And really the light bulb moment was he took one of our cars, or took my car, and just drove it 8 hours until it ran out of gas, and I was living in St. Louis at the time. I was back in Toronto to catch an international flight to Korea the next day, when my mom just kind of texted me saying, hey, look, like, your dad's gone. I go back. I have to change my flight to Korea, obviously. But then luckily he had his cell phone with him. And so we knew the direction he was traveling. The police were able to ping it. So I just started driving east like that night at like midnight. End up staying at a friend's place. She left the door unlocked because I got in until Montreal at like 4 a.m. My mom flies the next morning in. The police found his car at an off ramp, brought him to a hospital just overnight. And then when we get to the hospital the next morning, just smiles like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And then that's like what really kicked off what do we do? Do we sell the house? Like, all of these things. Like, does my mom, who was, a decade, 2 decades younger than my dad, like, does she retire, et cetera, and just like transition from being, a partner spouse to effectively a full-time caregiver, a part-time caregiver, and very terrible.
Now, the people who use your services, are they primarily the caretakers who at least start the process and or is your client really primarily people who are the category you described, where I'm seeing, I recognize these issues, I need help?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I'd say it's about 50-50 actually. So we classify it broadly into 2 categories, like the caregivers. So adult children caring for people who, might be in their 70s, 80s, 90s. Those people are predominantly, middle-aged, so 40 and up. And then another big swath of our population is what we call independent seniors. So we aren't serving people that have pretty severe cognitive impairments, just because, that's something that we have to get to, but we have to be focused, but we are serving independent seniors who are living alone, but, need help and assistance, or just advice. Because I mean, the challenge is whenever you're confronting something, you're doing it for the first time, right? Like in a do-it-yourself manner. Whereas what we're doing with digital tools, content, and then our care concierges, who are all, social workers, have like 10 plus years experience in, senior care, or working at a care agency, they just like have been there, done that, know some of the templates and the hacks, if you will, that can help come up with a better plan and then save you time, money, or stress as you go through it.
How has the adoption been? So it sounds like you have a mix of ages of individuals using the platform, using the product. What does that look like? What has that conversation been like?
Yeah. So, I mean, what we do is we try to design our product. So we partner a lot with distributors, so insurance distributors, financial advisors. So I think it's a complementary solution. So a lot of them, a lot of their customers have already taken the first step in terms of like creating a protection plan or financial protection plan. And then we think of it as we're a concierge senior care company that can help fill in the gaps, and be there day in, day out, week in, week out. And so what we do though is we're very proactive in engaging with our clients, SMS, email, voice, video. And then we have weekly explainer topics, that help them dive deep into complex topics like getting your will across the line or updating it, or arranging grocery delivery, or finding the best price for pharmaceuticals. And so we use those to really just like break it down and simplify a lot of the knowledge and make it very, very accessible, for whether it's the caregiver or an independent senior or independent elder.
Well, and the costs are, you've mentioned this a couple of times. People don't understand how much what the price is. Like, for instance, okay, my mother was at a semi-assisted living center in Salt Lake. Now, it was much cheaper to have her living in our house paid off, and I had to intercept and do all our banking. But then to move her to the semi-assisted living center, okay, so now her monthly expenses pretty much doubled right there. Yeah. Now, to go to the memory canal, the numbers were, I think, this sounds, especially on the East Coast, sounds ridiculous. Or it's like $2,000 a month. You get a meal. You have to get down the elevator, get to the meals. Mealtime was amazing. It was like everyone was rushing at the door with their walkers and stuff. But that's great if you can get down the elevator, right? So, and nobody's going to check on you. So you got, I had to create my own sort of network of people to show up and make sure, was she on the floor or not? Now, go to full memory care. Wow. I mean, that was like, I found a cheap one, and it was $4,000 a month. That's in Utah. Now, if I'd taken her out to New York, it would have been 12. How much now? I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, when you look at the expenses, what are the typical costs associated, do you see, caring for some of these seniors? Like, and how does it escalate as you're going through this process?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it can start, it depends on, again, the severity, right? And your needs, and then your geography. But let's talk national averages, right? So the national averages for a home health worker, who can do some light assistance, so if, your loved one, needs light cooking, cleaning, grocery work, et cetera, but from someone who's like trained at an agency who can also monitor, or assist with your activities of daily living, like dressing, grooming, bathing, transporting, meaning like getting up and out of chairs, from the kitchen table to the sofa. That would typically cost about like $15 to $17 an hour out of pocket traditionally. But then the challenge is most agencies or aid workers require minimum hours, right? So you can't really just find someone for an hour, right? Or 15 minutes every single day. And so on average, nationally, that will be about $4,000 a month. Moving into an independent living or an assisted living nationally will probably cost around like $3,000, $4,000 a month. That covers room and board and meals. But to your point, that's kind of it. If you do need any other type of assistance, someone to assist, getting up out of a bed, walking, assisting with clean, like bathing or grooming or eating, like assistance with food. Yeah, that can get up there. And yeah, you're right. Memory care could typically cost $10,000 to $15,000 a month, which, you think about it, that's more than half the country makes, in terms of gross income. Right.
So like if I, if you've been there, then, is your primary value at this point to help me navigate and actually vet these people, or is it to help me actually manage the cost, or is it both?
Yeah, it's both. So I think it's understanding the plan, right? So it's like understanding the care plan. realizing that it's not a sprint. I think a lot of people think that it's like, okay, I just got to do this and then get back to it. It's like, no, typically this is like, at a minimum, a 24-month journey, if you're at these stages, right? If you're just, not at those stages, coming up with a smart financial plan, particularly if people, have financial products, whether it's they own their own house or have, a guaranteed income plan, there's ways that you can really, really, be smart about how you want to fund this and minimize, the burden to others, right? Or not jeopardize your own financial independence if you are, taking care of a loved one. So that's kind of number one, coming up with a plan. The second thing that I think we do is, we curate using data. So we have data on 40,000 care providers. So variables such as, proximity to houses of worship, whether they're pet friendly, reviews as a minimum, the number of government assistance, whether that's like Veterans Affairs or Medicaid, et cetera. So there's all that data that we're then able to like personalize and use, and evaluate, and then curate those matches. And then the third, for some partners in a few geographies, we're able to arrange pretty significant discounts, just by being a smart advocate or broker on behalf of the family, as well as by being able to pool, negotiation. So it's like wholesale pricing in effect. And then we pass on, a large chunk of those savings, a significant chunk of those savings onto the loved one, the family. So they're saving 10, 15% compared to the $3,600 monthly average that I mentioned at an assisted living community, or, $4,000 a month for 20 hours a week of a home health aide.
Yeah, well, obviously, I think there's a big opportunity here for financial institutions to work with you. In fact, so much so we've actually got a partnership, a pilot partnership. Ryan, do you want to talk about what we're doing? We've been experimenting with.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, so NASA is an amazing, everything you guys are doing from podcast to innovation has been fantastic. And then the team here is, the project we're working on, or the pilot, is really, kind of what I mentioned, right? So it's like, how do you pay for senior care and remain financially independent? Can we create some content and just be valuable, just educating people around the awareness of what are the four main methods, to be able to pay for senior care, just coming up with a plan. And then if they do want additional information, either on, the financial side, they can contact a NASA representative, or on the care planning side, they can contact a Gerry representative. And so we're doing that through social media. Early days still, but it's been exciting, to work on the project and just like think through how we can develop collateral and raise awareness around these needs,
So you mentioned something earlier that caught my ear. So talking about being a smart advocate. In my family situation, dealing with, dementia and Alzheimer's and two different individuals, both situations were different. One was the live-in care situation where you're just hoping that, they're helped out of their bed that day and they're helped through the facility physically, et cetera. And the other one was a live-at-home situation where the individual had caretakers come to her and work with her throughout the process. It's an interesting mix. Obviously, every individual is different. And as these things progress, there's certain things that the ones who are being cared for either want or do not want, and they generally let their thoughts be known. And that can be a tough relationship. But kind of focusing on the relationship aspect, especially